In today's video, we continue our NHL offseason plan series. Today, we're on the 18th ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Detroit Red Wings. They made a push for the playoffs, came close, but not quite all the way there. They have an interesting offseason ahead with some large extensions for some of their top young stars, and they have a lot of veterans facing free agency. What will this team look like, and what are the top questions facing the franchise? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we continue on with our NHL offseason plan series where we analyze the 18th ranked team from the regular season, the Detroit Red Wings. They were certainly an interesting and at times fun team to watch this past year, making a push to get back to the playoffs, but ultimately fell just a little bit short. Steve Yzerman's now been in control of the team for some time, onto a second coach with Derek Lalonde for a couple of years. I know some might be questioning the Yzer plan, as they call it, since they haven't been able to make it back to the playoffs just yet. But the team did make a lot of progress. There's no doubt about that. The last couple of years have been getting better, more competitive, inching closer and closer to the playoffs. And while for the most part, that's tough to do because you have a lot of teams to overcome and pass. And if teams aren't regressing, it makes it that much more challenging. So we see a lot of the same teams, especially in the Atlantic Division, continue to be at the top of that division. And as soon as you think they're ready to take a step back, whether it's like a Tampa or a Boston, they just prove you wrong year after year. So let's recap last year for Detroit. We'll take a look at how things went individually as some top players, as well as some team stats. Take a look at how things changed throughout the year. And then we'll analyze their offseason with the salary cap space, expiring contracts, and what are the top questions they need to find answers for this summer. Now let's first start with the regular season recap. They finished with a record of 41, 32, and 9 for 91 points. Like I said, just missed out on the playoffs. They were in the mix right up until the end. They ended up scoring 275 goals, which was a top 10 result, 9th overall. You gotta like that. That's certainly something they're quite happy with. Goals against, however, a little bit of a different story. They still allowed 273, so they were only a +2 in the year. 273 goals makes them the 24th best team at keeping the puck out of the net. So if you're going to get in the playoffs, you got to have better result than that. That's probably your Achilles heel here, is certainly just giving up too much. They scored lots, but you got to keep it out on the other end as well. The power play, very respectable. Another top 10 result, 9th overall. 23.1% success rate, and the penalty kill wasn't probably as great as they'd like it to be, but it was hovering around league average and was respectable at 79.6% for 14th best. So your special teams are, theoretically good enough to get into the playoffs. Your ability to score goals, good enough to get into the playoffs. Your ability to keep the puck out of your net, though, not good enough, and that was, like I said, by far the team's Achilles heel. Individually, they were led by youngster Lucas Raymond, who put up 72 points this year. Not to say that anybody's surprised that he's becoming the player he is. Certainly the year before was really good for him as well, but he's certainly emerging into being a really terrific young player. He's going to be in line for a big extension, which we'll discuss here in a little bit. Raymond probably wouldn't have led the team in scoring had Dylan Larkin been able to stay healthy. He was next with 69 points, and he only appeared in 68 games. He was on pace for over 80 points, but unfortunately multiple injuries caused him to miss 14 games. Alex DeBrincat was third, scored 27 goals, 67 points. I know after a year in Ottawa where he had very similar totals, I think he had the exact same number of goals, 27. A lot of people were expecting better, especially when, the ability to play with Dylan Larkin on the top line, get more top power play minutes consistently. And then, of course, with Patrick Kane joining partway through, you had to think things were going to take off for DeBrincat. And like I said, I wouldn't call it a bad year. I wouldn't call it a bad trade. But it was certainly, I think a lot of people were hoping he'd get back to that 40-goal, 75, 80-point totals that we saw in Chicago in his earlier days. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. I know in Ottawa, like I said, they had two really good power play units 2 years ago with the Sens. He wasn't always on PP1, and he wasn't always on the first line. He was sometimes the second line because they had a lot of good forwards there. And ultimately, I don't think DeBrincat, there was rumors and speculation DeBrincat didn't like that. He wanted to be on the first line, first power play unit more consistently, which was part of his decision to want to leave. At the same time, he also wanted to head home to Michigan. So clearly, like I said, the grass is always greener. He's still a good player, still had a good season for them. It just didn't improve over what we saw in Ottawa. So it was certainly interesting, I guess you could say. We'll see how things go in year 2 of DeBrincat in Detroit. Gostisbehere was next. He was the 4th highest scorer on the team with 56 points. He's also a pending UFA. And in 5th place, you had JT Compher, who they had signed as a free agent with 48 points. And even though Kane wasn't there the entire season, he put up 47 points while appearing in 50 games. So certainly, Kane was a great addition. And if you look at in-season changes, he was the main thing that changed and happened to them throughout the year. They only had one other trade where they traded Klim Kostin to the Sharks for Radim Simek. Otherwise, they brought in Kane, partway through the year after he was healed and ready to go from his hip surgery, which was major. But at the same time, it was obviously very successful because we saw versions of Patrick Kane that we hadn't seen in a few years. So obviously Kane was a welcome addition, put up some great results, and we'll discuss his future here as well. Goaltending last year was it was up and down. Alex Lyon was pretty solid for them. He ended up playing the bulk of the games. Ville Husso, a combination of not having great results and battling injuries. Husso was expected to be the starter, had a 9-5-2 record with only an .892 save percentage and a 3.5 goals against. So Husso's year last year was very forgettable. I'm sure he wants to move on from that. Reimer ended up playing some important games as well, but Alex Lyon, like I said, had the bulk of them. 21-18-5 and a 904 save percentage and a 3.05 against. And Reimer ended up having a record of 20-11-8. So he even though Lyon did play a bit more, it wasn't drastically more. Reimer played a fair bit of important games and also had a 904 save percentage. So save percentage wise, they had very almost identical results. Lions seemed to get more of the bigger important games, but at the same time, Reimer had to play a lot too, and they did well. There's some big question marks over the future of goaltending in Detroit, which we'll get to here in a little bit as well. It's certainly one of the big questions they need to analyze. Looking at the offseason, now that we're through the whole regular season recap, looking at the salary cap, they have a lot available. It's $29 million, but they've only got 23 contracts on the books for next year, including 6 goaltenders as well as some defensemen and a couple goalies. So they have a lot of spots to fill. Obviously, they have a lot of RFAs and UFAs, more UFAs than anything. And certainly, they need to shell out some money. So as much as the $29 million looks like they have lots of available space, and in a sense, they kind of do. But if you look at what they have to do here, which we'll do now, it's going to go quick. Not to say that they can't take care of all their own business and maybe make some other additions, but it's not going to be as crazy as you would think. On the RFA side, they've got a couple of big ones with Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond, and of course Joe Veleno as well. But Seider and Raymond are players that they would probably want to do the long-term deals with. They're going to be able to command at least, I don't know, when it comes to Raymond, I'm thinking he's probably an $8 million player. Maybe a little bit more. Hard to say exactly where things land there. I know if you look at his fellow draft class player, Timmy Stützle in Ottawa, he got a little over $8 million. Originally, Stützle got off to a much faster start to his career than Raymond did, but Raymond, is basically caught up to him as far as production and how things are looking now. I think long term, they're both going to be terrific players for their teams. So I kind of expect now Raymond doesn't play center where Timmy does. So maybe not exact, but comparable for sure. So between Seider and Raymond, you're looking at some big money. For sure. On the UFA side, of course, led by Patrick Kane, who came in partway through the year and was an absolute force for them. You've got David Perron, who's been a good veteran for them. Daniel Sprong, who was surprisingly available after not getting retained in Seattle. Put up 18 goals for them. Only made $2 million last year. He's going to probably be looking for a good raise. Shane Gostisbehere, who I mentioned was the 5th highest scorer on the team, or 4th, sorry. James Reimer, who was an important piece as a backup goalie, and really want to even call him a backup goalie. Him and Lyon were more of a 1A, 1B last year, really. Christian Fisher and Zach Aston-Reese, also UFA. So lots of names out there that, played important roles. And like I said, whether or not they are back or not, you could see a different looking Red Wings team, but they could choose to bring a lot of these guys back. It's just hard to say. You would think on the UFA side that if they were going to, that Yzerman would have had at least a few more of these guys locked up before we got to this point. From the 2024 NHL Draft, it's going to be obviously another big time here for them. They've got 8 picks overall, including their first rounder, which is 15th overall, one of the lower picks they've had in recent years because they had a better regular season record, but certainly still a place in the draft where they can get a good player. And they do have multiple 7th rounders at the end of the draft, which is why they have 8 total. Otherwise, the Red Wings will be using a lot of their own selections here, but 15th overall, kind of talked about, will likely have the highest impact player, at least you would think. As far as the top questions facing this team, there are many, but obviously goaltending. What's going to happen next year? You've got Reimer is not signed. Lyon has still got a very cheap contract for one more year, and if he keeps playing the way he has, he's going to, I know he's not young anymore, but he can probably get one more better contract to kind of get him to the later stages of his career. So Lyon will probably be tough to retain after this year if Ville Husso can't kind of lock it down. But they got Husso under contract, making by far the most money. By far had the worst season last year. I know injuries played a lot of that, but they have to question, based on his whole time now in Detroit, 2 years, is he going to be the starting goaltender? Like, how's this going to look? Do they have confidence in him? As long as Alex Lyon's there, which he will be next year, I think they're definitely going to feel better about that. I do wonder, though, with Husso still being, he was he was an older, later bloomer, because the way St. Louis worked out, like between the time that they had like Jake Allen to Jordan Binnington, like Husso kind of got pushed down to depth charts there a little bit and didn't get an opportunity until he was well into his mid-20s. So, he's already, a little bit older considering the amount of experience he has. But we'll see. But goaltending has to be sorted out. I wouldn't be shocked if they do return to some capacity with, at least 2 of these 3 guys. But I just wonder if they really still see Husso as the immediate future. They got Sebastian Casa coming up through the ranks, but I'm not sure how close he is to jumping into the NHL. Of course, one of the bigger questions, and maybe even the biggest as far as the UFAs goes, is will Patrick Kane be back? It certainly sounds like there's a good chance he won't be, unfortunately. Obviously, after spending a long time in Chicago, getting traded to the New York Rangers at the trade deadline, and then having a big surgery and signing in Detroit, sounds like Kane wants a contract with some term. He had long-term stability in Chicago, spent a number of months in the Rangers organization to finish out last year. Obviously, this year in Detroit, I think he kind of like to make a new home for a few years and ride things out. So it sounds to me like the concern is that Yzerman didn't want to give the term that Kane's likely going to be looking for. Obviously, Kane's going to be looking for a bump in pay because he was, close to a point per game player here. I'm not sure how much money he wants, but I'm going to say it's going to likely be up at least around, he's going to make double probably what he made last year. I'm going to say at least probably $6.5 million. Like, Patrick Kane is still a really good player. And if he wants 3 or 4 years, I don't know if Yzerman's going to want to go there. It's not that he doesn't like Kane, not that he doesn't think he's a good fit. I just, you got older players, you're concerned about the play dropping off, you're concerned about the health. Yes, he proved last year that he's in much better shape after that surgery. But what if there's something that goes wrong this year? Like, it's, Yzerman's typically pretty conservative. So you got to think that the odds right now are against Kane coming back. And the way he spoke about things on his end of season media availability, and then if I'm not mistaken, I think he even had a social media post shortly after the season ended, kind of thanking everybody and saying how great of a time he had. You just don't see that for a player who's planning on being back. So I honestly think the Kane era in Detroit's likely done. Where he goes, it's hard to say, and I'm not sure how much you're going to see Yzerman push to retain him. But we could all end up being wrong here, but that's the way things look today, at least. So the next question is, how do you replace what he brought? That was a gimme, like a freebie in the free agent world that you got. And he came in and gave you lots of offense and helped boost all those totals that helped you be more successful last year. And you take that away, how do you bring it back? Obviously, the Red Wings might have to do some creativity here and find another player through free agency or something. Internally, besides Jonathan Berggren, I don't know if there's much there in terms of players that are going to step into the lineup next year and have more of a full-time role. So it'll be interesting that way. The blue line certainly needs work as well. I know Shane Gostisbehere again, had a great season, and he's a UFA. He's certainly rehabilitated his career after some downtime in Philly, and Philly had to pay a bunch of draft picks to get Arizona to take him over, and then now look at him. He's a lot better off than where he was. So I would think he's going to be looking for a big enough raise again. Is this something Yzerman's going to want to go down? Certainly besides the question mark around Gostisbehere and whether or not he'll be back, Jeff Petrie, I'm not sure how good that is. Like, he struggled. Justin Hall was a UFA signing who was healthy scratched a lot. You get a couple of guys there that are kind of lagging things down. And if you lose Ghost, they get some holes to fill in the back end for sure. And whether or not Gostisbehere returns, another big question. If not, how do you produce all that or replace all that offense from the backside? I mean, Seider and Wallman, pretty good at moving the puck, can get involved, but you take a 50-point defenseman out of the mix, it's going to be tough to replace for sure. So that's going to be interesting. Of course, you have some mega extensions coming for Mo Seider and Lucas Raymond. Like I said before, coming off their ELCs, they're restricted free agents, both in line for massive raises and big long-term deals. That $29 million could easily be cut in half or maybe slightly more than. With the money that they can command, I would suspect that you're most likely going to see 8-year deals for them both. But, Yzerman doesn't always do that. He may try to do more of a 5 or 6 year deal. They certainly won't go 4 because that'll walk them to free agency. But it's going to take a lot of money. So that's why I say that $29 million looks like a lot of money. But if they're both making upwards around $8 million or a little bit more, then you might have $16.5 million tied up in these two players. Well, then suddenly the $29 million drops to 13 or maybe a little bit less. And you still, at that point, only have 15 contracts on the books. So you're looking at, signing another, probably 7 players, maybe 8. So that's suddenly not so much money. And you look at the veterans that could maybe be gone, and Kane and Perron and Sprong and Gostisbehere. It's okay, you're not going to be able to keep very many of them. You want to have a little bit of available space. You know that the team is going to want to make a few changes, so it's tough to say. That's what I was saying about Ville Husso. Is how much do they still believe in him, and could they try to offload him? I'm not sure. Do they try to run with an Alex Line, James Reimer combo again next year if they can move Husso, re-sign Reimer for a cheaper contract? I don't know. Andrew Kopp has been a pretty big disappointment in his time in Detroit after signing there as a UFA. Another Michigan guy gone back to Detroit, had a good run in Winnipeg, developed and improved his game a ton, got traded to the Rangers on his expiring deal 2 seasons back before signing with the Red Wings. Had a phenomenal playoff run with the Rangers 2 years ago. Gets to Detroit and it just hasn't worked out. Ultimately, can he rebound? Do they try to trade him with retained salary? I think a buyout would still be quite costly long term because of the term on the contract. I don't know that Yzerman's going to want to go there, but Kopp's another name that I do wonder if they would try to move. Kopp and Husso would probably be the main ones that I think would be up for debate. If they could move on from Hall or Petrie, I think that's obviously names that they would be very interested in doing so. None of that's going to be easy. There's been some talk about David Perron being linked to a few other teams, including Montreal and Toronto as well. So I don't know. Perron was a pretty good player for them. He signed a 2-year deal. His first year was more productive than the second year, but still good help on the power play. Some people think with Craig Berube going to Toronto that he might want to reunite with his old coach from St. Louis. I don't know. Daniel Sprong, again, seems to get bounced around a lot, and he'll get signed up in a heartbeat, no problem if he leaves Detroit. But again, he's a player they should probably try to hang on to. He'll want to raise over his $2 million, but what kind of term of money he's looking for, we don't know. But if they want to stay on the younger side of things, after you look after Seider and Raymond, I think Veleno is definitely going to get signed too, but it won't be anything long-term or big money. Veleno is probably getting a 1 or 2 year deal, a lot cheaper, raise on the ELC, but not significant. And then, like I said, after that, you've got, you're probably looking to, I would try to bring back Sprong. Perron and Kane, maybe not, but the next question, like I said, is how do you replace the offense that those veteran guys brought you that you may not have now? So we'll have to see. I mean, can they pull more offense out of DeBrincat? Will he have a bigger year? But even then, he can only produce so much. So I do wonder, can Detroit maintain everything that they did this past year? It's going to be questionable for sure. I mean, unless they use that 15th overall pick, Maybe they package that for a trade for an impact player. We'll see what Yzerman has up his sleeve, but they certainly need to, figure out goaltending. If these veteran guys are not coming back, you got to figure out how do you replace that offense. Try to find some bargains out there, and then that's on the forward group, and on the back end, you've got a case where you need to figure out some defenders. Now you do have a guy in Simon Edvinsson coming up that should make the team on an ELC. That'll help matters as well. But you probably want to see if you can't find yourself at least one more. You get at least one more veteran guy that can do a better job than a Petrie or a Hall. Again, not easy. And then the ghost offense is going to be tough to replace. So I wonder if, depending on how Yzerman goes about things, it might be tough for Detroit to maintain everything that they've did this year. It could be a case of I'd hate to say it, but they could see regression. But ultimately, the moves they make will dictate if that's likely or not. I'm just saying that depending on what moves, if they have who else they can find as replacements for some of these guys, will dictate if that's trending in that direction or not. So we'll see. It's a pivotal year for Steve Yzerman. If the Red Wings, who came so close, if they make the right moves this offseason, they can probably take that leap next year and finally get back in. But if Yzerman doesn't make the right moves and struggles to fill some of these holes, and there's a lot of them, then I think we could see some significant change if things don't start well next year, whether it's a change in coach or maybe even a change in the front office over time. We'll see. Let me know what expectations you have of the Red Wings this offseason, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.